Once, in a small, secluded town, there stood an ancient graveyard at the outskirts, known only as Harmony Cemetery. It was surrounded by tall, gnarled trees that seemed to watch over the graves with their twisted branches. The locals spoke in hushed whispers about the eerie occurrences that took place there, warning all who dared to venture inside. It was a moonless night, the air thick with an unsettling chill. A group of adventurous teenagers, drawn by morbid curiosity, decided to test their courage and explore the cemetery. Among them was Lucas, the bravest of the lot, always eager to prove himself. As they entered the graveyard, the atmosphere grew dense and suffocating. Tombstones loomed like silent sentinels, their inscriptions fading away with time. The group walked deeper into the cemetery, guided only by the faint glow of their flashlights. In the distance, they spotted an old, dilapidated mausoleum, partially hidden behind overgrown bushes. It was rumored to be cursed, a place that no living soul should enter. But Lucas, eager to impress the others, scoffed at the superstitions and suggested they investigate. Cautiously, they approached the decaying structure. The rusty hinges of the mausoleum door creaked as they pushed it open. A wave of musty air engulfed them as they stepped inside. The flashlights revealed a haunting sight. Ancient coffins lined the walls, each covered in cobwebs and dust. Just as they began to feel the weight of their actions, a cold breeze swept through the mausoleum, extinguishing their flashlights. Panic set in as darkness surrounded them, and an eerie silence engulfed the tomb. In the pitch black darkness, they heard strange noises echoing from within the tomb. Faint whispers seemed to originate from the coffins themselves. Terror gripped their hearts as the whispers grew louder and more insistent. Then, suddenly, the whispers transformed into blood-curdling screams. The teenagers stumbled backward, trying to find the exit, but it seemed to elude them. The air was thick with a chilling presence, and an overwhelming feeling of despair consumed them. In a desperate attempt to escape, they frantically banged on the door, but it remained sealed shut. As their cries for help echoed through the graveyard, the screams inside the mausoleum intensified, as if the tortured souls were pleading for release. Time seemed to stretch on endlessly, until at last, the screams ceased, leaving behind an eerie silence. The darkness receded, and their flashlights flickered back to life. As the beams illuminated the mausoleum once again, the teenagers were met with a horrifying sight. Coffins were empty, except for one. On the ground lay a tattered journal, its pages filled with cryptic writing and drawings of sinister figures. The words spoke of tragedy, loss, and a pact made long ago, condemning the spirits to roam the graveyard forever. Terrified and shaken, the group managed to escape the cursed mausoleum. As they stumbled out into the moonlit night, they vowed never to speak of what they had witnessed. Yet, the horrors they encountered that night haunted their dreams for years to come. From that night onwards, the once brave Lucas was never the same. He couldn't escape the feeling that the spirits of the forgotten were always watching, their shadows lurking in the corners of his mind. As for the graveyard, its secrets remained hidden, and the cursed mausoleum stood as a grim reminder of the haunted past that refused to be forgotten. Harmony Cemetery became a place to avoid, a solemn reminder that some tales are best left buried in the depths of darkness, never to be unearthed again. I serve as a community patrol officer in Austin, Texas, where my role involves driving a compact patrol vehicle through upscale neighborhoods. My primary objective is to enhance the residents' sense of security, especially given the proximity of affluent neighborhoods to a more crime-prone city. At 27 years old, I contribute to maintaining a safe environment by conducting regular patrols, although my responsibilities differ from those of traditional law enforcement. During my patrols, I'm also responsible for documenting community violations. For instance, in certain housing areas, residents must trim their bushes weekly. If I come across an overgrown bush, I have to report it and leave a note at the relevant residence. While it may seem trivial to some, it's my duty to ensure compliance and maintain the neighborhood standards. Personally, I find it curious that people prefer living in communities with such strict regulations, despite the odd hours. 8 p.m. to 3. That I primarily work as a community patrol officer. I can't complain too much since it provides me with a job. Until recently, I hadn't witnessed anything unusual during my patrols. My usual encounters were limited to groups of teenagers engaging in reckless behavior at the parks. Last week, during my usual mid-shift patrol at around 10 p.m., something deeply disturbing occurred that has been haunting my thoughts ever since. I was following the designated route, a routine we are required to undertake at the middle, beginning, and end of our shifts. The atmosphere was serene and tranquil outside, with everything seemingly calm and quiet. While on my patrol, part of my duties involves inspecting and securing the community pools for the night. Approaching the small parking lot, I swiftly walked over to the gate and ensured it was properly locked. After a quick check of the pool area to ensure it was empty, I locked the gate again and headed back to my car. It was then that I noticed a figure, dressed in a hooded attire, sitting on a nearby park bench, not too far from my location. He stood there with both hands tucked inside his pockets, fixated on the ground. I presumed he might be waiting for someone, perhaps his drug dealer, but it wasn't my concern at that moment. Climbing back into my car, I carried on with my route. Navigating through the expansive community, the routes usually took about an hour to complete, assuming there was no traffic. As the clock neared midnight, I completed my assigned tasks and entered a phase where I simply cruised around the neighborhoods. Absent-mindedly, I navigated the car through the streets until I unexpectedly returned to the pool area, only to find the man was no longer on the bench. Out of sheer curiosity, I slowed down, scanning the sidewalks and the park, but he seemed to have vanished without a trace. Without dwelling on it, I proceeded with my patrol. However, as I drove past the dimly lit and deserted park, an unsettling feeling washed over me. Something inexplicable felt amiss. A few more minutes passed before I reached a stop sign, and that's when I saw a man standing by the side, seemingly ready to cross the road. Within seconds, I recognized the hooded man, realizing it was the same person I'd seen earlier. As he crossed the road, he halted midway and directed his attention towards me, with just a few feet separating us. He approached my window hastily, seeking directions to a particular address. I cautiously rolled down the window a bit as he urgently inquired about the location. Without hesitation, I replied that I wasn't aware of the address. Although I could have easily provided some general guidance, the atmosphere felt peculiar, raising my suspicions. What struck me as even more unusual was his lack of emotion or reaction to my response. He stood there in silence for a brief moment, before repeating his question verbatim, as if in a loop. At that point, fear and unease consumed me, and I became increasingly anxious. Without delay, I informed him that I had to leave. Swiftly rolling up my window and driving away, as I glanced in my rearview mirror, he stood motionless in the middle of the road, observing my departure. I parked a short distance away on a nearby street to gather my thoughts. The encounter left me deeply puzzled, unsure whether it warranted calling the police. It felt like a significant step to take, and I hesitated, not wanting to overreact. However, the question that kept haunting me was the man's intent in seeking that specific address. The uncertainty and curiosity gnawed at my thoughts, making me wonder if I should take further action. I opted to enter the address into my GPS, And surprisingly, it was only a few minutes away, located within the very neighborhood I was patrolling. I resumed my route and eventually reached the designated location at 1 a.m. The house appeared just like any other, with all the lights off and no sign of anyone outside. I parked my vehicle across the street and decided to observe the area for a while. In a matter of moments, the hooded man emerged, strolling down the sidewalk toward the house. From the safety of my car, I observed him walking up their driveway and approaching the front door. He knocked repeatedly, then paused for a significant duration, before knocking again. Nearly a minute passed before someone finally answered the door. Without any warning, the hooded man forcefully barged into the homeowner, violently forcing his way inside the residence. Shock engulfed me as I witnessed such a horrifying scene unfolding before my eyes. Gathering my composure, I swiftly dialed the police and reported the incident. As I anxiously waited, fear gripped me, while no visible movement could be seen for what felt like an eternity, lasting 2 or 3 minutes. I wrestled with the internal dilemma of whether I should intervene and assist the homeowner or prioritize my safety. Fear overwhelmed me, and I decided to stay in my car, not wanting to escalate an already dire situation. Unexpectedly, the front door slightly shifted before swinging open wide, and the hooded man bolted out, sprinting down the street. The police response time was surprisingly slow, nearly 10 minutes passing before their arrival. Although I understand it may not have been anyone's fault, a part of me felt furious at the delay. Sadly, the hooded man had vanished, leaving the homeowner unconscious and brutally beaten inside. As more details emerged over the following days, the situation became even more perplexing. The homeowner couldn't recognize the attacker and barely recalled the incident, and nothing appeared to have been stolen from the house. Strangely, the assailant seemed to have targeted the homeowner deliberately, suggesting a personal motive despite their apparent lack of acquaintance. The entire situation remains peculiar, leaving me with a lingering sense of unease. It has only been a week, and I hope that further details emerge, ultimately leading to the apprehension of the hooded man. In a small, secluded town, nestled deep within the woods, lived a family of 4. The Millers. They resided in a large, creaky mansion that had been passed down through generations. The locals whispered of its haunted history, warning the Millers not to stay home alone, especially on moonless nights. One fateful evening, Mr. and Mrs. Miller had to attend an urgent family matter out of town, leaving their 2 children, Emily and Timmy, alone at home for the night. The children were excited for the adventure, believing they were old enough to handle themselves. As the darkness enveloped the mansion, Emily and Timmy began to feel a strange presence lurking in the shadows. The floorboards creaked, and whispers echoed through the empty halls. Ignoring their unease, they watched a movie together to distract themselves. Midnight approached, and a sudden power outage plunged the mansion into complete darkness. Emily grabbed a flashlight, and Timmy clung tightly to her as they navigated through the pitch black house. The strange sounds grew louder, and the feeling of being watched intensified. Suddenly, a portrait on the wall fell to the floor with a loud crash. The children jumped in fright, and Emily's flashlight flickered ominously. They heard a faint giggle from somewhere within the house. Fear gripped their hearts, and they hurriedly made their way to the living room, seeking refuge. In the dim light, they noticed shadows moving on the walls, shapes that seemed to have no physical form. The air turned icy cold, and the room filled with a suffocating heaviness. The giggles grew louder, echoing through the empty rooms, making their hearts race. Emily bravely decided to investigate the source of the laughter. She urged Timmy to stay put while she ventured upstairs, following the eerie giggles. As she climbed the creaky stairs, she felt an icy hand brush against her arm, sending shivers down her spine. Terrified, she reached the top of the stairs, only to find no one there. Back in the living room, Timmy felt a cold breath on his neck. He turned around but saw nothing. The shadows danced eerily, taking on grotesque shapes that seemed to mock him. In a trembling voice, he called out to Emily, who was still upstairs searching for the giggling ghost. As Emily roamed the dark corridors, she found herself drawn to the attic. The giggles grew louder, and a strange force seemed to pull her toward the mysterious laughter. With each step, the house groaned as if it were alive. The door to the attic creaked open, revealing a dark abyss. Back in the living room, Timmy's fear escalated. The shadows seemed to encroach upon him, engulfing the room in a menacing darkness. The laughter turned into malevolent whispers that taunted and tormented him. Emily's voice echoed through the house as she descended from the attic. She seemed distant and strange, her eyes vacant and glassy. Timmy tried to talk to her, but her replies were incoherent and unsettling. It was as if something had taken control of her. Terrified, Timmy mustered his courage and made a desperate decision. He ran to the basement and searched for a dusty old family album. He knew there was a page dedicated to warding off spirits. Clutching the album tightly, he recited the incantation, hoping to banish the malevolent presence from their home. A powerful gust of wind swept through the mansion, extinguishing the candles and filling the air with an otherworldly howl. The haunting laughter and whispers ceased, and the shadows retreated. As the clock struck 3 a.m., the mansion fell silent. With the first rays of sunlight, the Millers returned, finding Emily and Timmy huddled together in the living room, visibly shaken. They recounted the night's events, and the parents immediately decided to move on from that house. In the heart of the countryside stood an old, crumbling mansion, long forgotten by time. Legend had it that the mansion was cursed, and the locals avoided it at all costs. One gloomy evening, a curious teenager named Alex couldn't resist the urge to explore the notorious place while their parents were away for the night. As the sun dipped below the horizon, darkness cloaked the mansion. Armed with only a flashlight, Alex approached the decaying structure with cautious steps. The moment their foot crossed the threshold, an eerie chill filled the air. Unfazed, Alex ventured deeper into the mansion, fueled by a mix of excitement and fear. The sound of footsteps echoed through the hollow halls. But Alex was the only living soul inside, or so they thought. Suddenly, a faint whisper broke the silence, beckoning them to explore further. Each step felt heavier, as if an unseen force urged them on a sinister journey. As Alex reached the upper floors, the walls seemed to close in. Shadows danced menacingly, and the air grew stifling. Fear gnawed at Alex's resolve. But the haunting curiosity wouldn't let them turn back. An inexplicable force seemed to be guiding their every move. In the dim light, Alex stumbled upon an old diary. Its pages were filled with cryptic symbols and chilling tales of a malevolent spirit that haunted the mansion. The more Alex read, the more the whispers seemed to manifest, closing in like a tightening noose. In the heart of the mansion, they discovered a locked door that beckoned to be opened. Overwhelmed by dread, Alex hesitated, but a relentless curiosity overpowered the fear, and with trembling hands, they unlocked the door. Beyond the door lay a hidden room, shrouded in darkness. As Alex's flashlight beam swept across the walls, They gasped in horror. The room was adorned with unsettling paintings of ghostly figures, their eyes piercing through the veil of time. Suddenly, the door behind Alex slammed shut, trapping them inside. Panic set in as the haunting whispers grew louder, filling every corner of the room. Shadows seemed to crawl towards them, taking shape in the form of sinister entities. Frantic, Alex tried to open the door, but it remained sealed shut. The malevolent spirit seemed to feed on their fear, its presence growing more malevolent with each passing second. They knew they had to escape, but the walls felt like they were closing in, suffocating them with their haunting past. In a last-ditch effort, Alex mustered the courage to recite an incantation they found in the diary. As the ancient words left their lips, the room trembled, and the haunting presence dissipated into thin air. The door creaked open, releasing them from its clutches. Breathing heavily, Alex fled from the mansion, vowing never to return. From that night on, the mansion remained a forsaken relic, a testament to the dark forces that lurked within. And for Alex, the chilling whispers and haunting memories would forever haunt their dreams, a reminder of the malevolent spirit they encountered in the abandoned mansion.